Hello there. I'm just gonna talk while I put this, close this up, a little tripod, instead of do those damn makeup things while you're telling a story. Uh, just popping in to say, are you registered to vote? Are you registered? Are you registered? I will do anything to make sure people are registered. And if you have registered before, please, please check it, because there seems to be a lot of states that are either purging the polls or threatening to purge them, which basically means they just go through and they make claims of why they're taking somebody off the registered voter uh, list for some stupid, obscure, erroneous excuses. It's been 7 years or 10 years since they've registered. Maybe they're voting in every election, and that's why they have been registered for so long. I mean, these are the stupid reasons. You don't have a period after the Mr. or the Mrs. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's not your official. I mean, it's ridiculous the shit that they're doing. Okay, I don't know if that specific one is, but I wouldn't be surprised. I do know somebody who registered at the I think it was the end or right after the holidays. They checked last week and they are not registered. So, it's not worth calling and finding out why did I register at this point. It just matters to get registered again. Just freaking do it, and sort out the cookies later. Uh, the most important thing is to be registered by the time you go to vote. Be that election day, be that early voting in person, be it mail in ballot. You have to be registered for anything for you to, vote with anyway. Um, Also, be aware, although I am a huge proponent of mail in ballot voting, the last several years, the post office has gotten even worse. And I just want to make a point here. You've heard Donald, and if you're asking why I say it Donald instead of his proper pronunciation, I'm going to go on a tangent for that for anybody who has not heard my previous, videos where I've mentioned this. If he knows damn well how to pronounce Kamala, it's not effing hard. A comma, and a la. Kamala. How hard is it? Kamala. So, he's doing it deliberately. The Remaga people are doing it deliberately. The right leaning anchors and hosts on TV shows are doing it deliberately. They fucking know it's Kamala. So, until such time as they want to be, and since they play follow the leader, they play Simon Says with Donald. Um, I'm not going to pronounce their names correctly. I saw on one of the shows last night somebody was saying it was about Sarah Huckabee, and he was calling her Huckabee, and or something like that. And I started laughing because the other guy asked, "Why are you saying it like that?" And he said kind of like what I said. And I have been doing this for a couple weeks. In fact, some of my graphics, I even wrote capital D, small o, capital NALD, because that's the only way I could think of doing it in written form when you can't hear the emphasis as Donald. So if he does not think that name pronunciation correctly matters, then he's Donald. And he's Donald Jr., Ivanka is her, or Ivanka. I mean, you know, Eric, you just go Eric. It's kind of a lame. You automatically, at least I do, when I hear the word Eric, I'm like, I immediately, unfortunately, think of that doofy little snot nosed kid who's so stupid. Uh, um, so I'm gonna have to work on that one. A Rick, that's there. You've got Donald Jr., Ivanka, and a Rick. All Donald and Melanie Trump's children. Yeah. How about Tiffany? Tiffany. Yeah, that might work. Donald Jr., Ivanka, because she is all I, me, and a Rick. Kind of like America. We're here in America. It's America, not America. So, if you are registered and it's been a while since you registered, please check. Verify that you still, indeed, are registered. Also, I believe mail in ballot requests, some states they may be done with. I don't think so. Probably not by the end of September, but that will be soon. So, because I was going to go back to the post office because they need a lot of time, up to 2 weeks or 3 weeks for it to come. Let me tell you something. The last election, last year we had some local shit. I got the sample ballot 2 months after the election. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you why the post office has been so effed up since, well, let me see. Since Donald Trump appointed Louis DeJoy to the post office. Oh my. I wonder if there's any correlation between that. Of course there is. In fact, for those of you who don't remember, the last presidential election, word got out to the courts. Oh my. That DeJoy had removed a large number of mail sorting machines right before mail-in ballots were being sent out, so they would be returned as well, both through the mail, which was already hindering mail delivery, but it was also hindering voting materials, sample ballots and such. People were reporting. So the courts ordered him to immediately put them back, hook them back the hell up, plug those puppies in, and start using them again. So that night, where they were unplugged and stored, they suddenly, how did that happen? They got vandalized with important parts that they couldn't just replace. And so the next morning, when they were supposed to be returned and reinstalled and used, they went back to court and said, "Oh my judge, we are so sorry. We went to go get them last night and do it, and they were vandalized." Oh, so they were vandalized the very night we told you to reinstall them. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And were there any cameras perchance in the area that they were stored? You know, sir, I don't think there were. If they were, they weren't working because I don't know anything about cameras, surveillance cameras. I am so sorry, Judge. And they did indeed vandalize, and they didn't just say it. There really were parts missing that they could not work without. I will tell you one thing, because I'm on all of these programs. Of course, I'm voting. But mail from voting information of any type, mail that has like Office of Temporary Assistance or whatever it is in your state that helps like with things. Anything that has that because it's got EBT, food stamp information. Sometimes they change something and they have to do a recertification that you didn't know was coming. And if they only deal with the mail for like federal and state and legal things like that. That covers the EBT. So if there's anything in the return address that's a voting thing, or obviously looks it, or that's EBT related, Office of Temporary Assistance, the domestic, whatever, economic security is in some of the states, Department of Economic Security, it's kind of the same thing. Or if it has something with the housing authority, because those are the ones where the housing vouchers and stuff, same thing. Sometimes there's a change that you need to be aware of, or there's something that has to be filled out. If you don't, you fall off the program, and they'll send a reminder. But if you're not getting those either, you don't know, and there's no way they back up by calling or anything like that. So DeJoy knows that. He's not that stupid. He does know that. Like I said last time, I got my sample ballot, not even a mail-in, a sample ballot, 2 months. So here I had some issue with I was using ClickPay. I do not trust them at all. As a third party, kind of like a automatic rent payment. And apparently over a year ago, they just dropped 2 months. It was shortly after, a year after my son passed, and I was in a bad spot, which is why I didn't want to trust myself doing stuff for important things. But anyway, they also had raises of the rent that I wasn't notified through them and anything like that. The point I'm talking about that is we got it settled. But they shouldn't be waiting a year or 2 years if it's something to do with rent or mortgage or something. I mean, that's just effing ridiculous. Letting it all pile up so you get all that extra interest from the purse. That's effed up. In a lot of states, it's not allowed. Anything past 12 months, that's your fucking problem if you didn't recognize it as a landlord. That's your problem. But not here in Jersey. So, I got stuff. I freaked out because apparently since May, they were trying, but I wasn't getting the information. I got something, an e-courts thing in my email, and I was freaking out, and I was trying to figure out what the fuck is this about. I don't, I was waiting for legal aid to get back to me if somebody would take my case. They did. Because it was obvious what the effery going on here, But the next day, I'm looking all over, trying to find stuff. I go to the mailbox. The next day, 2 days later, I find a stack of legal envelopes from the place where I live, the management, that type of stuff. All together with nothing in between them. All in a stack like this. And the top one actually has a literal stamp. One of those stamp things that said May 8th. This was August when I got that. Because if something jams in a machine, this is before him. If something would jam in a machine and get torn or crinkled up, or it can't go through the machines, it has to be done manually and taped or whatever. They have sorting buckets, and they'll just throw something that in there that has to be done manually because obviously the machine effed it up. Um, Sometimes they don't get to sorting those for months. If there's only a little bit in it, nobody's gonna stop and take time from the current mail to go do that and get that sorted, and it takes time, even if it's just this full. So they wait till the damn thing gets full, and it's a day's job for one employee to do the back mail. And so you can see why it could be a month or so. And that is happening. And it's been happening in DeJoy's post office. And what was it, like, it wasn't long after he got it the first time. And you can't just fire them. It has to be done by a board, and you can't fire somebody. A board has to elect somebody once their initial time. It's not where Biden could have just replaced him. That position can't be done that way. So we've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's coming now. It's up soon where it's time to reassess, I guess, whatever they do. But that's why it hasn't been addressed, because it's not a position that has the ability for the president just to fire or replace, or Congress or whatever. It's actually a postal board. But anyway, that's why I say don't trust the mail. And normally mail-in ballots is something I would absolutely tell you, especially from somebody who has a messed up foot, which is what the disability I'm on is for. So it's fucked up. We're talking if I'm walking 10 minutes, I'm going to have to stop for a minute. That's just the way it is. Otherwise it starts cramping, and if I do not stop, it goes to the back, and I'm just really... Eventually the nerves in the leg will say F you and won't support if I don't stop and take a breath. Believe me, it's happened. And I had to grab onto something because it really was refusing if I pushed it. So it's not mind over matter in that respect. And I don't have a vehicle. Obviously, it's my right foot. I'm not even sure if I can safely drive. I don't know. I've never tried since, the last several years. So, last decade. But, and sometimes I lose a little feeling in the toes or something. Probably a swelling that day. But anyway, so I was a big proponent of mail-in voting. And if you're in a rural area where it's not that easy, it's not just a matter of asking somebody and just when they can do it to take you to do early voting or something. But I am going to say, this year, we can't afford missing votes that are in some fucking resort box in the post office. Because usually Democrats vote more by mail and early voting, and Republicans usually vote on election day. The way it is, which is why I covered this in another video, which is why those dumps overnight on election night overnight, it's because the mail-in ballots, from military and from other people, are the first ones to be received in the office and the last ones to be counted. That's just, again, the laws. They count once the polls close on official election day, they count the votes done that day on election day first. So you're going to see a surge in Republican candidates, or who Republicans were voting for. You're going to see a surge in that at first. So it always looks like, oh God, right from the get-go, that's awful. How are we ever going to catch up? But then you'll see it starts evening out more, as they start tabulating it into the night. And then when most people, that's because they're doing the, after that would be the early in-person voting. So it's basically the first ones in received are the last ones tabulated. The last ballots voted are the first ones counted. That's basically how it is. And so after the election day, it will be the in-person early voting ballots that came through there those several days. And last is the big batch of all the mail-in. Plus, it gives the mail-in votes more time, even though they were sent out really early with the Joyce post office. They're going to take longer. I've sent stuff in the same little town, and it took a week to get it. Somebody 3 states away got theirs like in 3 days. So explain that. Make that make fucking sense, okay? I think our particular post office, I don't know what the problem is. A lot of people here do have housing vouchers, so I wonder if, whatever. But, I also know my carrier is definitely not a Republican views, let's say that. I mean, definitely not Democrat views, my bad. He said a few things that I wanted to just be like, oh, no, and correct the incorrect thing he said in favor of Trump. But I didn't want to get into it with the guy who delivers my mail. You know what I'm saying? So I just was like, well, we all have different viewpoints, There's more than one viewpoint. And pretty much let him know that I don't agree with that. So let's just step away from this topic, Plus he's working, I don't need to start a discussion like that. I was just going to my mailbox when he happened to be coming through, because I know it's usually between 1 and 2. So I just happened to go down at the time he was there, or just showed up as I was coming up to the boxes. He was at the boxes ahead of us when I got there. So those are things that if you're on any of those programs, the EBT, the housing vouchers, and obviously voting, be aware of things, of research dates, of when mail-in ballots should have arrived by, and if you haven't gotten one, notify them, call them, let them know. First of all, they need to know that that ballot has to be whatever terminology they use. That ballot that they issued has to be issued as sacrificed or whatever, meaning that it was never voted, so they can vote on early voting or whatever. If you do ask for a mail-in ballot and you can't make it to, that's the other option. Get your mail-in if you can't do it on a specific, on one of the early voting days and times, because they're not open the hours a poll is. They're much limited hours. You can get, if you can get a mail-in ballot, and then just drop it yourself personally in one of the ballot drop boxes that they'll have around, usually in front of town halls and things like that. Libraries, government, offices of temporary assistance or economic help. Economic security is what they were called in Tucson. But I'm not saying don't send your ballot back by mail. I'm just saying do it early enough and check to see, because I hate to say this, but I have not, especially this past year, especially after the courts thing. See, the hope is for them, and I've known this for years, they're hoping that by the time in the interim, from the time like you don't get the thing and you happen to fall off the EBT program, or because you didn't respond, they think, well, we're not going to keep sending stuff, the housing vouchers for this, if they're not there, if they're not responding. Not taking into consideration how the post office has been, and that's the only way they contact you. If I didn't have the courts thing from e-document, I would have missed a court. I would have, like, it was ridiculous. And the amount was like 3 times what it should have been. And, because all it was like a year and then a year and a half of rent raises. And when you're on it's like $15, or, when you're on a voucher. So, be careful with the mail. I'm sure some of it has to do with the type of living. If you're in a home as opposed to apartments, it's harder to misplace something that's going to an individual home or business or an organization. They're not going to fuck with those as much as individual people or people in large complexes. It's like, who knows, something could have happened. Maybe it was put in the wrong box, they just threw it out instead of returning it. There's a lot of excuses. So please make sure you're registered. Even if you recently registered, please make sure. Also, don't count on normal mail time frames. Well, it should get back there. It's 3 weeks to the election. It should totally get there in time. Think about maybe having somebody swing you by a little drop box for the mail-in votes. That might be, for me, I'm gonna see about going to, when I get the early voting dates, set that up, because I'm planning on working the elections. I've already got my training class scheduled in October, and more than likely I'm not going to be working in the polling place that I happen to vote in. If you do work in the polling place that you actually go to vote, that's awesome, because you don't have to worry about any of that. You just be the first voter after everything's set up. Just say, okay, I'm going to go through the voting process, and you're done. Most of us don't get that chance. It's very rare to get assigned to the place that you actually vote at. And if you do, you're either by pure luck or you've been working the elections in that state for some time in that spot, and they've eventually gotten you to the polling place that's closest to your home. Just to go in and for the first time or whatever, or second time, and be assigned to that place that you would normally go to is not typical. That would be a blessing if that happened and you haven't worked them before or often. So please, please, please take precautions. 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't feel totally safe. If you got that mail-in ballot and you have voted it, just drop it off at a drop box. It's so much more secure there than trusting to Joy and his post office with that. So just a heads up. Hopefully you listen to me, because I had a ballot that never got voted. It was voted and then it came back to me like 2 months later, torn. Yeah. I wasn't living in this place. I was living in another place in Jersey, and I was so pissed off. I was so angry, because I had gotten it in really early. Like, as soon as the first ones were mailed out, I got it back in. And, yeah. Got it back months later. And it was torn up and taped and stapled. I was pissed. So don't let that happen to you. This election is seriously, urgently important, not only for the next few years, but it has to do with the Supreme Court too. Whoever is the next president, there's going to be a few that are going to have to retire out, which means a few will be appointed. And Trump already got the chance to appoint some, and well, you all know what the Supreme Court is now. And if he wins and gets to reappoint the ones that are MAGA leaning old people, Thomas is one of them, they're just going to put more MAGA in, and we're talking they'll be there for decades. We can't do that. We can't have that. Because the Supreme Court will fucking destroy this country. They will make him king if he gets back in. They will literally, they've already pretty much said it, that he's immune, but they will use the word dear leader or king or something. Whatever tickles his Donald's fancy. So, yeah. Voting and making sure your vote gets where it needs to be is urgently, vitally important. It seriously is. And, I don't know how else to express that to you guys. It is vital that we all vote. Do not get complacent, Democrats, just because Kamala and Tim are flying right high right now. Don't get complacent and figure, well, my vote, they're already well over. Don't do that. Because if a lot of you do that, then we aren't in that sweet spot anymore. Because we don't have your votes. So please, please, please make sure your vote gets where it needs to go this year. Please, please. See you at the polls.